Hello, and welcome to week number 6. This week is about using emotional intelligence to lead ethically and build trust, especially when things get stressful. Here's the simple idea: your IQ helps you think, but your EQ helps you manage yourself and your relationships so your judgment stays steady under pressure. As you work through the readings, pay attention to 3 outcomes I want you to practice: self awareness, ethical behavior, and trust under stress. By the end of the week, you'll create a short term action plan. Keep it practical. Pick one EI skill you want to strengthen, identify one high stress situation where you'll apply it, and write the specific steps you'll take before, during, and after that moment. If you do that well, you're not just learning EI, you're building credibility and becoming the kind of leader people can rely on when it matters the most. On this slide, I want you to translate the big idea from the previous slide into what you'll actually do this week. First, focus on the skills you'll practice. When you notice an emotion, treat it like information. Ask yourself what it's telling you about your goals, values, or an unmet need. Then practice regulating that emotion so your credibility stays intact even under stress. Next, pay attention to how you communicate in groups. Your goal is fairness and clarity, not winning the moment. Trust is built when people experience you as consistent, steady, and respectful. Now, here's what you'll deliver. You'll write a short 2-week action plan grounded in the readings. In that plan, I want you to choose one trust building behavior you'll repeat on purpose, one team norm you'll model or reinforce, and one feedback check in where you test how your actions are landing with others. If you do these 4 things well, you'll finish the week with a plan you can actually use in real group leadership situations. On this slide, I want you to see the roadmap for moving from concepts to a short-term plan you can actually use. First, we'll talk about why ethics and trust get harder under stress. Under pressure, people get faster, more reactive, and more likely to justify choices than they would make not in a calmer moment. Next, we shift from individual EI to group EI, the move from me to we. That means paying attention to how your emotions affect the team and how the team's emotions shape everyone's behavior and judgment. Then we focus on the norms that create trustworthy teams. I want you thinking about what your group repeatedly rewards, tolerates, and practices because those patterns become your culture. Finally, you'll apply everything in a practice scenario and use it to draft your short term action plan. On the right side, I'm showing you what good work looks like. Your plan should be specific, not vague, with clear triggers, behaviors, and a timeline. It should be testable with at least one metric or observable cue so you can tell if it's working. It should be social, meaning it includes a team norm and a feedback loop, and it must be ethical, protecting accuracy, fairness, and follow through. On this slide, I want you to connect emotional intelligence to ethical judgment when you're under pressure. Stress doesn't just make you feel more intense, it can quietly change how you think and how you treat people. On the left are common pressure traps. First is narrowed attention, where you lock into the threat cue and miss the context. Next is attribution bias, where you assume someone meant harm instead of considering other explanations. Then there's escalation, where you double down to avoid losing face, even when the decision is no longer the best. Finally, there is a tone drift, where your communication becomes sharper and less curious, which can quickly damage trust. On the right is a quick EI reset you can use in 30 to 60 seconds. Pause and name what you're feeling and what triggered it. Separate facts from your interpretation so you don't treat assumptions as evidence. Ask one context question that helps you see what you might be missing. Then choose a response you can defend later, not just one that releases pressure in the moment. As you practice this week, I want you to treat this recess like a leadership habit. The goal is to stay accurate, fair, and trustworthy, even when the situation feels urgent. On this slide, I want you to shift your thinking from individual emotional intelligence to group emotional intelligence. Individual EI helps you perform well, but group EI is what multiplies performance across a team. Start on the left side of the visual. Individual EI is your foundation, how you manage yourself. That includes self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. When you strengthen those, you become more steady and credible, especially when things get stressful. Now move to the right side. Group EI is about what your team creates together through norms and relationships. It's built through trust, a shared identity, and a sense of collective efficacy, meaning the team believes it can succeed together. The key takeaway for you is the prompt at the bottom. When you walk into a group situation this week, look for team multipliers. Ask yourself what you can do that increases trust, reinforces identity, and builds efficacy. That's the bridge from me to we, and it's what makes ethical, trustworthy leadership visible in real time. On this slide, I want you to see group emotional intelligence as the base layer that enables everything above it. When a team has strong group EI, it creates the conditions for good collaboration and good decisions. Look at the center of the model. Trust, identity, and efficacy are the three essentials. Trust is psychological safety plus reliability. People feel safe speaking up and can count on each other to follow through. Identify is the shared purpose and we mindset, where the group sees itself as a unit. Efficacy is the confidence that the group can deliver even when the work is difficult. Once those three conditions are in place, participation and cooperation become normal, not forced. When that happens, you get the outcomes at the top: better decisions, more creativity, and higher productivity. So your leadership focus this week is simple. In your groups, ask yourself what you can do to build trust, reinforce shared identity, and strengthen group confidence. Then pay attention to norms, how your group disagrees, how it recovers after tension, and how it follows through, because that's where ethical leadership becomes visible. On this slide, I want you to use Group EI as a diagnostic tool, not a one-size-fits-all solution. Before you act, decide what level the problem is at, then match your response to that level. Level 1 is person to person. This is where emotions surface in a single interaction between two people. If you notice tension, defensiveness, or misunderstanding, your best move is usually interpersonal. Clarify facts. Name the emotion without blame. Check assumptions and use perspective taking. Level 2 is the team level. Here, the issue is not just one conversation, it's the team's mood, norms, and patterns. If you keep seeing the same conflict cycle, silence, or sarcasm, you're looking at a norm problem. Your intervention is to reset expectations, name the pattern, and agree on a shared rule for how the team will communicate under pressure. Level 3 is cross boundary. This is about trust with stakeholders or other teams. If your group is viewed as unreliable, reactive, or unclear, the fix is not just internal. You focus on the team's external awareness and credibility. You communicate early, set realistic commitments, and follow through consistently. As you work on your short-term plan, I want you to pick one real situation you're facing and label it level 1, 2, or 3. Then choose actions that match that level so your effort actually solves the right problem. On this slide, I want you to focus on level 1, which is how you work with one individual inside the group. This is where group EI shows up in the small moments, especially when one person seems difficult, defensive, or negative. The case here is the bad attitude label. A low EI response is to isolate the person or write them off. A high EI response is to slow down and ask what is underneath the behavior. In this example, the defensiveness was connected to feeling insulted by how the team framed her role, as if her prior work was not good enough. So the first norm is interpersonal understanding. Before you diagnose attitude, you separate attitude from defensiveness. Defensiveness usually signals threat, fear, or perceived disrespect, and your job is to identify the trigger. The second norm is perspective taking. Instead of rushing to the majority view, you hear out the dissenter. That doesn't mean you agree with everything they say. It means you gather the missing context so the team does not make a lazy judgment. The third norm is balance. You confront behavior that harms the team, but you do it while still validating the person's value. The message is your behavior needs to change and you still belong here. As you think about your 2-week action plan, choose one level one situation you're dealing with. Identify the behavior you need to address, name what it might be signaling, and write one sentence you can use that holds both standards and belonging. On this slide, I want you to shift from managing one person to managing the group as a system. Level 2 is about regulating the group's emotional state because a group's mood can quietly drive decision, quality, tone, and follow through. First is group self-awareness. Your job is to notice the emotional weather in the room before it takes over. If the group is flat, tense, or cynical, you name it respectfully and reset. The point is not to criticize the team, but to acknowledge what is happening so the group can refocus and make better choices. Second is creating an affirmative environment. This is not forced positivity. It's guiding the group back toward what can be controlled, what is possible, and what the next step is. Under stress, groups drift into blame, helplessness, or complaint loops. An emotional intelligent leader interrupts that drift and reorients the team toward agency. Third is creating resources. Groups need a safe release valve so frustration doesn't leak into meetings or sarcasm, conflict, or shutdown. That can look like a short, structured venting window, a constant debrief routine, or even appropriate humor that lowers tension before problem solving begins. As you work on your short term action plan, choose one level 2 move you will practice for 2 weeks. Either a quick mood check in at the start of the meetings, one phrase you'll use to pivot from blame to control, or one resource you'll build so the team can vent briefly and then move forward. On this slide, I want you to think beyond your team and focus on how your team's emotions and decisions land on others. Level 3 is working across boundaries, which means building bridges with the rest of the organization so trust doesn't stop at your team's door. The trap here is isolation. A team can be highly productive, yet still cause harm if it ignores downstream impact. When a team stays inward focused, other departments experience surprises, rework bottlenecks, or resentment. Under stress, isolation worsens as teams narrow their focus to their own deadlines and start treating other groups as obstacles rather than partners. The solution is an ambassadorial role. This means you intentionally represent your team to others and represent others back to your team. You build political capital the right way by showing respect, giving credit, and communicating early. When a crisis hits, that trust becomes support, not resistance. The key norm is external awareness. I want you to practice asking before you finalize a decision, who else will feel the impact of what we're about to do? Then take one concrete step to connect, such as a quick check-in with a partner department, a heads up before changes roll out, or a short follow-up that closes the loop. For your action plan, choose one boundary building behavior you will repeat for 2 weeks. Keep it simple and observable, such as sending one proactive update each week to a stakeholder, inviting one cross-team voice into planning, or ending major decisions with a brief impact check and communication plan. On this slide, I want you to see what group emotional intelligence looks like when it's built into how a team works every day. IDEO is often used as a model because it treats emotions as part of the work, not a distraction from it. Start with level 1, the individual level. Notice the emphasis on early intervention. When a designer is frustrated or starting to isolate, leaders do not wait for it to blow up. They step in quickly, not start to blame, but to reduce friction and help negotiate a workable next step. The message is, if you're stuck, you're not alone, and it's safe to name what is happening. Now, level 2, the group level, this is where norms shape the emotional climate. IDEO uses playfulness on purpose, not as silliness, but as a tool to lower threat and keep learning going under pressure. The fail often to succeed sooner mindset helps the team regulate stress by normalizing iteration. In other words, mistakes do not equal shame, they equal feedback. Then level 3, cross boundary. This is where relationships become a performance advantage. The exploded truck story shows what happens when a team invests in trust with partners outside. And here is the move I want you to make as you think about your own context. Pick one action at each level that you can implement this week. For level 1, one way you'll notice and respond to frustration early. For level 2, one norm you'll reinforce that keeps the team learning under stress. For level 3, one relationship you will strengthen so your team is not operating in isolation. For your short-term plan, keep it realistic. Choose one small behavior that you can repeat consistently because consistency is what turns a good idea into trust. On this slide, I want you to focus on the business case. Emotional intelligence is not just a personal skill, it's an organizational performance strategy. When leaders regulate well and build trust, those qualities show up in measurable outcomes. First, performance. When teams cooperate across boundaries, performance increases. This is not just because people feel better, it's because communication improves, conflict is handled faster, and decisions are made with more complete information. Cross team trust reduces the handoff problems that slow work down. Second, talent acquisition. High EQ cultures tend to attract and retain strong people. People want to work where feedback is fair, leaders are consistent, and stress is managed well. In practice, this means fewer preventable departures and stronger succession planning because people are developed rather than burned out. Third, efficiency and safety. When emotions run unchecked, you get more errors, more incidents, and more formal conflict. When leaders model calm, clarity, and follow through, teams waste less time on confusion and rework. You also reduce the conditions that lead to accidents and grievances. Fourth, customer relations. Clients and stakeholders can be demanding, especially under deadlines. Emotional intelligence helps you stay professional, keep conversations fact based, and protect the relationship while still setting boundaries and making hard calls. Here's the key takeaway that I want you to remember. EQ is a multiplier. It strengthens how you lead, how your team coordinates, and how the organization performs under pressure. As you build your short-term plan, connect your EI action to one of these outcomes. Ask yourself, which one do I need most to improve right now? Performance, retention, efficiency, or stakeholder trust? On this slide, I want you to think of Group EI as something you build on purpose through norms, not something you just hope the team has. Norms are the repeatable behaviors that shape how decisions are made, especially when people are stressed or disagreeing. The model on the left is a simple sequence. First is leadership modeling. Whatever the leader consistently does becomes the real standard, even if written values say something else. Second is training, which means giving the team shared language and tools so people can name what is happening and respond consistently. Third is culture, where emotions are treated as useful data rather than something to hide or punish. Fourth is action, where the team checks itself and makes adjustments instead of repeating the same patterns. Now I want you to turn into something practical for this week. Pick one norm you'll intentionally model. For example, curiosity over blame. That means when something goes wrong, you start with questions that clarify facts and context before you evaluate. Next, add a 2-minute check-in before a key decision. The point is to surface stress or confusion early so it doesn't leak into the decision. Then reward speaking up, not just being right. That is how you build psychological safety and better judgment in the room. Finally, close loops. This is a credibility habit. Before the meeting ends, make sure it's clear who's doing what and by when. If you do nothing else, do that one thing consistently. It protects trust because people can rely on follow through. As you write your short-term plan, choose one of these changes and describe exactly where you'll use it, what it will look like, and how you'll know if it worked by the end of the week. On this slide, I want you to shift from ideas to a plan that you can test in real situations over the next 2 weeks. Think of this as a small experiment. You're not trying to become perfect. You're trying to become consistent and measurable. Start on the left with the trigger. Pick one predictable pressure moment, not five. For example, a deadline slip, a tense meeting, an unclear decision, or pushback from a stakeholder. Then name the emotion signal and what it's telling you. I want you to treat that emotion as data. It usually points to a value, a goal, or an unmet need like clarity, fairness, respect, or control. Next, choose one cognitive strategy and one behavioral strategy. Cognitive resets your thinking so you stay accurate and fair under stress. Behavioral is what you do or say so your response builds trust instead of damaging it. Keep both choices simple enough to repeat even when you're tired. Then choose one trust behavior you'll repeat on purpose. This is the credibility piece. It could be closing loops, asking one context question before judging, summarizing decisions clearly, or following through on timelines you set. Now move to the right side. Pick one team norm you will model or reinforce. This is where your plan connects to group EI, not just personal EI. Choose something that improves how the group communicates and decides, like curiosity over blame, making space for dissent, or agreeing on next steps before leaving a meeting. Then set one feedback check-in. Decide who you will ask and when you will ask. Make it simple, like a quick question after a meeting or at the end of 1 week. Finally, decide how you will know if it worked using one metric or observable cue. It could be fewer rework cycles, fewer tense exchanges, more clarity in decisions, or faster follow through. Before you finish, anchor your plan in the readings. Use at least 2 ideas you can name directly, such as the quick EI reset steps, the trust identity efficacy framework, or matching the intervention to the level of the problem. The goal is to show that your plan is not just personal preference, it's grounded and testable. All right, that comes to the end of week 6. Thank you so much. And again, if you have questions, feel free to email me and I can help you with that. And I will see you in the next lesson. Thank you.